dear friends, your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful non-violent tool we have to create a more perfect union.
That was Congressman John Lewis speaking of the importance of the vote at the 2012 Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. Lewis spent much of his life fighting for voting rights and was a champion of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It established federal oversight of election laws in states with a history of racial discrimination. The Supreme Court struck down key sections of that legislation in 2013. And as Ed O'Keefe reports, Lewis had been pushing to restore parts of the law ever since.
The bill is passed without objection.
Congressman John Lewis banged the gavel on a vote last December to reinstate parts of the Voting Rights Act.
Laid on the table.
A bill first passed in 1965, in part because of his march in Selma, Alabama, the scene of violence against black protesters demanding voting rights horrified Americans. Months later, Lewis was there when President Lyndon Johnson signed the act into law.
The President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, members of the House and Senate, and the American people heard our cries and responded to our pain and to our suffering.
The Voting Rights Act was renewed several times, most recently in 2006 with bipartisan support. But in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court invalidated federal oversight of elections, a key part of the law designed to keep tabs on states with a history of discriminating against minority voters. The court decided such oversight was no longer necessary because of changes made by states since 1965. Lewis strongly disagreed and became the lead advocate for fully restoring the law.
They're saying, in effect, that history cannot repeat itself, but I succumb and walk in my shoes.
Vanita Gupta is head of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a group Lewis worked with to restore the act.
The 2013 decision from the United States Supreme Court devastated the voting rights movement.
Well, give me an example of where it's still an issue.
Well, voter suppression is alive and well in the United States of America in 2020. So today, when you see on the news these long lines, why do those long lines exist, and why do they only exist in predominantly black and brown communities?
But Senate Republicans have refused to take up the issue of voting rights, arguing states should be left to run their own elections. Just last week, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told the Wall Street Journal there's very little tangible evidence of this whole voter suppression nonsense that the Democrats are promoting. But now, congressional Democrats say they'll be stepping up pressure on Republicans.
The best thing that Senate Republicans can do to honor the legacy, service, sacrifice, and sincerity of Congressman Lewis is to pass that Voting Rights Act bill.
Congressman Jeffries and some of his colleagues now say that if or when parts of the Voting Rights Act are restored, the legislation doing so should be renamed the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. But the realities of Washington are such that unless Democrats have full control of the White House and Congress, passage of that legislation isn't expected anytime soon. Tony?
All right, Ed, thank you very much.